sign it online, so I can just print it and sign it. Thanks.
Hi.
Fantastic. See, I'm good. She's sitting over there.
Yeah, normally, well, yeah.
In the background.
I have no idea. Like, we've got a lot of stuff. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. My name's Ann Morgan. I'm the chair of the Toronto Police Services Board, and I'd like to welcome everyone who's here today to this hybrid meeting of the board. Initially, I'd like to acknowledge the land we are upon. We acknowledge that the land we are on as we hold this meeting is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And it's now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. The board acknowledges that the Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed by the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty, signed by multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. At this point, I'd like to ask if there are any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. Seeing none, let me proceed. I'd like to now turn it over to the board's acting executive director, Du Buchanan-Gisser, who will go over the meeting's logistics.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to everyone who has joined us in person, as well as those who have called into this meeting. Please note that this meeting is also being live streamed on the Toronto Police YouTube account and will be available there at the conclusion of this meeting. Joining us in person, we have Chair Ann Morgan, Vice Chair Francis Nunziata, Member Lisa Kostakis, Member Nadine Spencer, Member Nick Migliori, and we are still awaiting Councillor Lily Cheng and Councillor...
He's here.
Oh, sorry. And with us is Councillor Vincent Crisanti. We also have members of the board office staff, Chief Demkew, members of the command team, members of the service, and of course, members of the public. We have individuals who have registered to make deputations, both in person as well as virtually, on our agenda items. And as per our regular meeting process, deputations will be heard prior to the item being discussed and voted on by board members. When it comes time to do a deputation, those who have registered will be called upon or brought into the meeting by our colleague, Danielle Dowdy. And as always, deputants will speak, followed by an opportunity for board members to ask them questions. Chair.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry to interject, but I'm having trouble hearing. I don't know if it's the system sounds very different in this meeting today than previous meetings. I don't know if anything could be done about it, or maybe it's just me. Okay.
There seems to be an echo.
Yeah, exactly. It's feedback or something.
Maybe we can continue in the meantime, try to work out the sound issue. Thank you, Councillor Crisanti. At this time, I'd like to pay tribute to two officers who tragically lost their lives. Ontario Provincial Police Detective Constable Steve Turango and a member of our own service who died by suicide and will not be named at this time. Detective Steve Turango, who died on May 29th at the age of 35 in an on-duty accident in East Zora, Tavistock Township. Detective Constable Turango was known for his positive and friendly nature and for always having a smile on his face. He enjoyed fishing and spending time in Northern Ontario, and he loved hockey. He was a patient and good-hearted, adoring husband to his wife Danica and a devoted father to their 3 boys. Detective Constable Turango loved being a police officer and was well known and very popular in his community. He also was known as a loyal, honest police officer with renowned integrity. His tragic death occurred on the very first day of his new assignment in the OPP Organized Crime Unit. Detective Constable Stephen Turango was a hero in life. Many people know him and worked with him, expressed just how large a hole he leaves in the Ontario Provincial Police and in the fabric of the community of which he played so great a part. These losses, individual and collectively, take a deep toll on all of us, but especially on the wider and deeply connected policing community. We stand beside our service members and the police community countrywide in honoring the lives that have been sacrificed in the name of public safety. Our thoughts and our hearts are once more with our own members as they continue to cope with this tragic and unrelenting loss of life. Our hearts are also with the member of police services across Canada as we pay tribute to Detective Constable Stephen Turango. His kind and genuine spirit, his immeasurable contribution to his community, and the ultimate sacrifice of his life in the name of public safety. I would also like to pay tribute to the Toronto Police Service member who tragically died by suicide earlier this week. We acknowledge their lives and grieve the loss of our member and acknowledge the tremendous impact this death has had on all of us. The tragic loss is another blow to the Canadian policing community and to the Toronto Police Service community, in particular, after having a long series of tragedies in the past year. We join the Chief in encouraging our members to access the ranges of supports that are offered by our service. As the employer, the board has ultimate responsibility for the health and safety of our service members. The board and the board office will continue to support the service's effort to protect the mental health of its membership, but also reducing the stigma around getting help and normalizing conversations about mental health. Today, we honor the life of this officer, their contributions, their dedication to public safety. We see their suffering, the suffering of their families, the challenges that the families face, and their sadness. We grieve along the officer's family, friend, loved ones, and colleagues, the people who are left behind. And we vow to prevent this from ever happening again. And I'll turn it over to Chief Damque for some comments.
Thank you, Chair.
Earlier this week on Tuesday, I, along with Toronto Police Association President John Reid, met with the grieving family of one of our members who died by suicide. We are heartbroken to share this news. Our officer, a 26-year veteran with the service, is survived by his wife and sons, to whom we have offered and continue to offer our deepest condolences and support. After speaking with the family personally, we will not be releasing our member's name at this, our member's name. The loss of any member is tragic. Myself and our command team and our police family deeply grieve alongside his family. This is truly a difficult time for our members across the service who are grieving another lost friend, revered colleague, and another reminder of the importance of focusing on the health and wellness of our members. This is also difficult for our policing partners and peers who tended to our member on Thursday, and including his family in their jurisdiction where he and his family made their home. In the face of unimaginable tragedy, we continue to encourage our members to make use of the vital mental health supports and well-being resources the service offers. We also continue to encourage discussion to ensure that our members are reaching out to their trusted colleagues and relying on one another throughout their times of need and throughout their career. Chair, back to you.
Thank you. I would ask now that if you are able to stand, please do so as we all take a moment of silence to honor these two officers. Thank you. Please be seated. And I now have the privilege to officially welcome Mr. Nick Migliori to our board. Mr. Migliori was appointed as a board member by the province of Ontario on May 18th, 2023, for a period not to exceed 1 year. Finally, Mr. Migliori is a business owner, a consultant, and volunteer who has lived and worked in the city of Toronto his whole life. He's a graduate of Queen's University Executive MBA program, studied criminology and facility management at the University of Toronto, holds a BA from York University, and is a board-certified fraud examiner. Mr. Migliori specializes in threat risk assessments and mitigation solutions, security investigations, audits, event planning, facility management, and staffing. Maybe you should actually be working for TPS as I'm reading your resume. As a subject matter expert, Mr. Migliori has consulted and provided services globally for numerous organizations and facilities, including school boards, universities, financial institutions, tourist destinations, the G20, the Vancouver Summer Olympic Games, the CNE, and several stadiums and sporting facilities. An international presenter and past academic instructor, Mr. Migliori is also the recipient of a number of prestigious awards in his field. As a subject matter expert in risk assessment, security, and facility management, Mr. Migliori has used his skills and knowledge to assist a number of boards throughout his career. He's currently the chair of Runnymede Health Care Centre, a director of Toronto Crime Stoppers Board, and past director of the Toronto Victim Services, among others. On June 5th, I conducted the official and legally binding swearing-in ceremony for Mr. Migliore. Today, we're recreating that as a public ceremony. Mr. Migliore's extensive, diverse background make him extremely well-positioned to understand and appreciate the issues which the service is currently dealing. His clear and genuine passion for supporting Toronto and all its neighborhoods will greatly assist the board in determining priorities that actually reflect community expectations and his input. Mr. Migliore brings an impressive governance background, and he'll be an incredible asset to us on the board as we continue our important work. I look forward personally to working with him, and we welcome his vast experience along with his invaluable and unique perspective. Welcome, Nick. Just before we do the swearing in, I understand today you might have to leave a little bit early. You had a commitment before you were actually appointed. So if you just want to say a few words, and then we'll conduct the swearing in.
Sure, Madam Chair. I'm the chair of Runnymede Healthcare Center, and today we're launching an outstanding, amazing announcement with multiple levels of government. For example, the Premier, the Solgen, Minister of Labor, CEO of WSIB will be there announcing a budget to launch the first ever PTSI Center of Excellence for First Responders. Excuse me. So this was pre-organized several months in advance, and I apologize, but I will not miss any other meetings. So we'll have our annual general meeting. The levels of government will announce the monetary amount of money that they're dedicating to the project. The project is being built in 11 Division on Dundas Street, Francis's ward. And oh, it's not your ward?
No, it's just,
Next door.
I'm just the other side of the track.
On the other side of the tracks, okay. So it's quite a project. We were looking at the drawings, so the way the project works is that the PTSI Center on Dundas near Runnymede, connected to Runnymede Healthcare Center, with also retreat homes and facilities out in Caledon. So we've just finalized the purchase of the Caledon properties, and today's the big announcement with the financial commitment by the government. So it's pretty exciting, and we've been working on it for about 6 years, and it's coming to fruition today. So again, I thank you very much.
All right, perhaps it might be better if we step up maybe to the podium, and at that point, I'm going to administer the oath of office. Do I need a mic? Is the mic on? Okay. Thank you, Member Migliore. Take the Bible in your right hand and repeat after me. This is the oath of office. I solemnly swear that I will be loyal to His Majesty the King and to Canada.
I solemnly swear that I will be loyal to His Majesty the King and to Canada.
And that I will uphold the Constitution of Canada, and that I will, to the best of my ability, discharge my duties as a member of the Toronto Police Services Board.
And that I will uphold the Constitution of Canada, and that I will, to the best of my ability, discharge my duties as a member of the Toronto Police Services Board.
Faithfully, impartially, and according to the Police Services Act, and any other act, and any regulation, rule, or bylaw, so help me God.
Faithfully, impartially, and according to the Police Services Act, any other act, and any regulation, rule, or bylaw. So help me God.
And now the oath of secrecy. I solemnly swear that I will not disclose any information obtained by me in the course of my duties as a member of the Toronto Police Board.
I solemnly swear that I will not disclose any information obtained by me in the course of my duties as a member of the Toronto Police Services Board,
except as I may authorize to do so or required by law, so help me God.
except as I may be authorized or required by law, so help me God.
Thank you. We'll just sign. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chair, thank you. Just for 30 seconds, I did want to, first of all, of course, acknowledge our newest board member, but on the heels of how we started this meeting, it can't be overstated the importance of what you're going to attend to later today and the incredible support that is being brought forward as a result of the announcement today for our members. So thank you for that work. Thank you to everyone, all levels of government, who have supported this work and continue to support trying to improve the care for first responders who at this time need it more than ever. So thank you very much, and I wish I could be there with you later today, and I definitely appreciate everything you're doing in that space at Runnymede Health. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. And now the first order of business, I'd like to turn it over to Chief Demke for the monthly update.
Thank you, Chair. So June is Pride Month, a time where we acknowledge and show our support for our 2S LGBTQ plus communities and allies. On May 17th, we hosted a Progress Pride flag raising ceremony here at headquarters, where the flag waves proudly as I speak. It was a day where I, along with members of the command team, Community Partnerships and Engagement Unit, Equity, Inclusion, and Human Rights, the 2S LGBTQ plus internal support network, along with members of the community, came together in support of the International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, and Transphobia. On June 1st, for the first time in the history of the Toronto Police Service, the Progress Pride flag was raised at all our public-facing facilities that could accommodate two flags, including the Toronto Police College. I'm also excited to announce that this year marks the first time in 13 years that we've been invited to host the Chief and Board Pride reception out in the community at the Metropolitan Community Church, and that event is taking place this evening. As Chief, I'm honored to be able to celebrate in the community, and it is our resounding hope that this will continue year after year. Myself, our command team, and our service look forward to this incredible reception this evening. This month also marks National Indigenous Month. On June 5th, I had the distinct honor of participating in a celebration for the occasion at the Wellesley Community Center, along with Ms. Kostakis from the board. This month, we commemorate and appreciate the rich heritage, diverse cultures, outstanding achievements, and exceptional contributions of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. As we reflect on this year's theme, truth and the path forward, we acknowledge that policing has had and continues to have a role in the systemic racism that negatively impacts Indigenous communities. Addressing this starts with us, the individuals who make up the Toronto Police Service. It requires us to acknowledge the true history of Canada, identifying what we need to change, and then facilitating these necessary and long overdue changes. We are committed to engaging with members of our Indigenous communities in meaningfully and culturally sensitive ways. We will continue to find ways to reduce the inequities that currently exist, and we will continue to implement reforms that help us build stronger and more meaningful relationships with all of the Indigenous communities we serve. Chair, thank you for the opportunity for the update.
Thank you. And at this point, perhaps I can go through the entire agenda. The first matter on the agenda is confirmation of the minutes from the regular public meeting, which was May 18th, 2023. There might have been an error on that, and it listed in the previous iteration that was sent out to April 28th, but that was a typo, and it's been ameliorated. So we'll hold that down because we have deputations. Item number 2 is the Safetyo presentations. Need to hold down for presentations. Item number 3 is a City Council decision, member motion, MM518, bolstering the Toronto Police Services Hate Crime Unit. We'll hold that matter down for a deputation. Number 4 on our agenda is a report June 5th, 2023 from Chief Demkew regarding a request for receipt of donation electronic storage device for the K9 unit. Any questions? Okay. I'll hold for questions. Thank you. And then the next item, we'll hold number 4 for questions from Councillor Chang. Number 5, again, a report from Chief Demkew on May 23rd, 2023, contract extension increase for the wireless parking ticket issuance system, the ACCEO solutions. Any questions? May I have a motion? Member Kostakis, seconded by Councillor Crisanti. All in favor? Thank you. Seeing none opposed, approved. Item number 6, again, a report from Chief Demkew, May 30th, 2023, a contract award to SEB Administrative Solutions for Benefit Administration and Retiree Solution. Any questions? All right, may I have a motion to approve? Thank you. Vice Chair Nunziata, seconded by Councillor Chang. Approved. Number 7, again, a report from Chief Demkew, May 23rd, 2023, and it's the renewal of the lease agreement for Parking Enforcement West, which is located at 97 Lawrence Avenue West in Toronto. Any questions? May I have a motion? Councillor Chang, seconded by Councillor Crisanti. All in favor? I don't see any opposed, so that's been carried. Item number 8, again, a report from Chief Demkew regarding the special constable appointments and reappointments, June 2023. That's being held down for deputations. The next item, number 9, again, a report from Chief Demkew. It's the 2022 annual report regarding city traffic agents, University of Toronto, Toronto Community Housing Corporation, TCHC, Toronto Transit Commission, TTC, special constables. It's item 1 through 4. Any questions? May I have a motion to receive? Member Kostakis, seconded by Member Spencer. All in favor? I don't see any opposed, and so carried. Next is item number 10, 10.1 through 4. They're budget variance reports from Chief Demkew with various dates on it.
I'll move it.
Thank you. That's motion by Vice Chair Nunziata, second by Member Kostakis. All in favor? Seeing no one opposed, it's carried. And the last, or number 11, is regarding the paid duty rates, and we're going to hold that down for deputation. Number 12, again, a report from Chief Demkew, May 23rd, 23, the annual report, April 1st, 2022 to March 31st, 2023, grant applications and contracts. Any questions? May I have a motion? Member Spencer, seconded by Member Kostakis. All in favor? Right, seeing no opposition, that's carried. Number 12. Number 13, it is a semi-annual report on occupational health and safety for July 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2022, as it relates to member well-being strategy update. and that's being held down for deputations. Item number 14 are from the chief. There is item 14.1 through 14.4. They are the chief's administration investigation reports as they relate to various complainants. May I have a motion? Member Kostakis, a seconder. Vice Chair Nunziata, all in favor? And so carried. And that takes us back to the beginning, and I believe our very first item is confirmation of the minutes regarding the public meeting held on May 18th, 2023. And in person, I believe we have Mr. Morin, who as well, thank you, included a written submission. Thank you, Mr. Morin. Derek.
Regarding this item?
And I noticed you guys swapped out Jane for this meeting for Scott. One thing about Scott, since he's here, he was at the old Public Works Committee meeting, Meritorious first term. And he was sitting 2 people away from another City of Toronto lawyer who got into it with Giorgio Mammoliti, believe it or not. And this City of Toronto lawyer told Councillor Mammoliti, when members of the public come to speak at these meetings, that they can basically talk about whatever they want. So I always associate Scott whenever I see him with that meeting. So in these minutes it says, regarding comments made by the deputant, Ms. Jane Burton, counsel for the board provided clarification regarding the vice chair's ability to serve on the board and chair a meeting if needed. So for clarification, this is what City of Toronto lawyer Jane Burton said. The council rules which are set out in Chapter 27 of the City of Toronto's Municipal Code prevents the Speaker of Council from serving as the chair of the police board and other committees. That chapter does not prevent the Speaker from serving as a vice chair, which was never in question. Off mic, Councillor Nunziata can be heard saying to Jane, and chairing a meeting. Jane replies, so as part of the duties of vice chair from time to time, the vice chair may need to chair a meeting, and that is not prohibited by Chapter 27. Now this is what former Executive Director Ryan Teschner, who was here briefly this morning, said in the minutes for the December 2022 meeting. At its meeting on November 14th, 2022, the board recognized then Vice Chair Councillor Francis Nunziata as board chair following former Chair Jim Hart's retiring as chair of the board. As City of Toronto Municipal Code Chapter 27 Council Procedures states, the Speaker cannot serve as chair of the Police Services Board. Vice Chair and member Ainsworth Morgan has been acting in the position of chair. Again, Ainsworth could do that because he wasn't the Speaker of Toronto City Council. These are some of the rules in the police board's own procedural bylaws. 7.1, when the chair is absent or refuses to act, the vice chair will act in his or her place, and while acting, will have the authority, rights, and duties and powers of a chair. Section 6, duties of the chair. The chair of the board will preside at all meetings of the board. Now, here's the part I think everyone's missing. There is a definition for chair in Chapter 27 of the City of Toronto's own council procedures. That definition for chair is simply the person presiding at a meeting. The person presiding at those 2 meetings in question was Councillor Nunziata, who's the vice chair of this board. Again, that section from 27 of the council procedures for the City of Toronto says, the Speaker cannot serve as a standing committee chair, community council chair, or as the vice chair of the Toronto Transit Commission or the Police Services Board. If you read in the definition for chair from the City of Toronto's own procedural bylaws, section 27, it really comes out to the Speaker cannot serve as the person presiding at a meeting of the Police Services Board. There's also a definition for chair in Black's Law Dictionary. Part of that definition is an excerpt from Henry M. Robert himself from Robert's Rules of Order, which says, the term the chair refers to the person in a meeting who is actually presiding at the time, whether that person is the regular presiding officer or not. So I just wanted to go over what it says in Alberta versus MNR 1996, Supreme Court of Canada, what it says about the plain meaning rule. Justice SD relied on the following passage from Dreger Construction of Statutes. One of the cardinal principles of the plain and ordinary meaning approach is that nothing be read into a section unless no sense can be made of that section without the addition of the extra words. In spite of 2 recent amendments to this section, Parliament chose not to define secured creditor in the manner urged by the appellant. To read into the section the words suggested by the MNR would be an unwarranted judicial usurpation of the legislative function. In this case, there is a definition provided by the City of Toronto in Chapter 27 for what a chair is: the person presiding at a meeting. In the future, because she's the speaker, because I don't want to go through this again, Vice Chair Nunziata respectfully cannot serve as the chair of this board. And yeah, I guess that's it.
Mr. Mora.
My mom called me Derek.
And my mom calls me Ann. And I believe we have a virtual deputation for, from Mr. Langenfeld.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Mr. Langenfeld.
All right, thank you. And just to let you know, it's very difficult to hear the people speaking there, including the deputants, for the people here acting remotely. I'd like to thank Derek for his submissions there, and I certainly agree with the points he's raised that we've been going over and over here again about the chair hosting the meeting. But he also provided another fact here for me, and I'd like to welcome the member, Mr. Migliori. But in looking at his Executech International profile, it quotes here, Nick is one of the few recipients of the honorary detective, quote, gold shield, close quote, badge from the Toronto Police Service. So just to put on the record that there seems to potentially be a conflict of interest there. Meanwhile, I'm glad to see that his skills certainly will hopefully be helpful in advising the board here on an ongoing basis. I wanted to speak last month, Chief Demke, you weren't able to stay at the board. You had obviously other solemn duties that you had to deal with. And I didn't get to raise an issue, and unfortunately it's so rare that some items come up that the public has the opportunity to actually speak on them and not be ruled that they're off topic and we get silenced, let's say. So the question in terms of looking at your application to the Prime Minister for bail changes, and I'd like to point out that in Tennessee and California, in dealing with parole issues, they actually have a policy where, as a condition of someone receiving parole, they're required to agree to a condition where they can be subjected to search without reasonable cause. And so I'd simply like to suggest that perhaps on an ongoing basis in dealing with bail claims where somebody has been arrested in possession of weapons, that perhaps it would be appropriate for the service to simply speak with the Crown and seek the agreement of the person about to receive bail that they will be subjected to warrantless searches without condition, and that might in fact help to deal with some of these situations to allow your officers to follow up and see who has weapons and who might be a real danger to society. That was the only issue I wish to really speak on today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Langenfeld. I just wanted to make a quick comment, and thank you for your concerns over potential conflicts of interest as it relates to board members. I just wanted to identify for you that Mr. Migliori was an Ontario government appointment, and like myself, it's a very rigorous process of examining potential conflicts of interest of any past affiliations. For example, I worked for MAG, and though I had not worked there for 6 years, it still was something that was rigorously scrutinized. So I just want to allay your fears that, in fact, there are those steps, and including the board as well is very cognizant of that, not only the appearance of bias, but there is bias, and I can tell you that was thoroughly vetted. So thank you for your comments and your concerns.
Well, I appreciate that. And, of course, the Police Services Act bans a defense attorney from being a member of the board. It doesn't preclude a prosecutor from being a member of the board, but I believe it does preclude a member of the police service from being a member of the board. And technically, I guess with the honorary gold shield, one might argue that Mr. Migliori was, in fact, a member of the police service that he's now in oversight of. So there's certainly well, let's just say I hope he'll be very mindful of the appearance of a conflict there, and he'll be particularly mindful of the public's opinion on some of these issues as well as the police department's issue. But thank you for your clarification, Chair Morgan.
Yes, and thank you very much. I appreciate you raised that concern, Mr. Langenfeld. All right, moving on to the next item. Oh, we have to confirm the minutes.
I'll move the minutes.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Yes, thank you, Member Kostakis. So carried. And I believe at this point, item number 2, we have a presentation on Safetyo.
We do, Chair, and before I turn it over to Acting Deputy Code, I just did want to acknowledge the presence of Executive Director of Social Development, Denise Campbell, and Manager of Community Safety and Wellbeing, Scott McKean. But not only acknowledge their presence, but really acknowledge the incredible relationship we have of collaboration and a shared desire to move forward in as it relates to community safety and well-being within the City of Toronto. In my previous roles, I had occasion to work very, very closely with both Denise and Scott, and I would just say that they are not only incredibly committed professionals, they are truly colleagues and friends in our shared responsibility and commitment to community safety and well-being. So thank you both for being here. Really appreciate it. Deputy Code, please.
Chief, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here, and certainly my pleasure to introduce to you Acting Staff Superintendent Shannon Dawson, who will be providing a presentation on Safetyo, Toronto's multi-sectoral community safety and well-being plan. As part of Safetyo, Acting Staff Superintendent Dawson is the TPS representative and plays a key role on the city's Gun Violence Reduction Steering Committee. The presentation this morning will provide details of how the implementation of Safetyo has progressed and contributed to successful outcomes, and in particular, in the area of gun violence reduction. To date, gun violence reduction has been down 36% since the same time last year. This is the second year in a row where there has been a reduction in gun violence in our city. Safetyo is a city-led community safety and well-being plan, so it is very appropriate for me to also acknowledge our city partners, and specifically the Executive Director of Social Development, Denise Campbell, and the Manager of Community Safety and Wellbeing Planning, Scott McKean. Thank you to both of you and to your teams for your efforts in ensuring that our cities and communities remain safe. I'd now like to call upon Acting Staff Superintendent Shannon Dawson.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay? So good morning, board members, command, and members of the public. As mentioned by both the Chief and Deputy Code, I'm being supported today by our city partners, Executive Director Denise Campbell and Manager Scott McKean. They, along with their team, are truly the backbone and the driving force of Safetyo, and we are so fortunate to be able to collaborate with them. I will be providing an update on Safetyo, Toronto's 10-year community safety and well-being plan, During the course of this presentation, I'll provide the Safetyo implementation, the Safetyo Collaborative Analytics and Learning Environment, otherwise known as SCALE, and information on our efforts towards gun violence reduction. Safetyo is really about making a fundamental shift on how we think about community safety. It's a collaborative, multi-sector approach that is being led by the city's Social Development, Finance, and Administrative Division. It's become clear to all of us that no single sector can address the intricacy of community safety and well-being on their own. We must work together, and that's what Safetyo is. Safetyo provides us all with a roadmap on how multiple systems can work collaboratively. It is driven by data and guided by a public health approach. Safetyo has 26 priority actions across 7 strategic goals. The implementation plan includes many programs that the TPS is committed to. Some of these are the Toronto Community Crisis Service, Policing and Law Reform, the Toronto Office to Prevent Gun Violence, which I'll provide more information on, Safety on the TTC, School Community Safety, the implementation of justice centers, and as mentioned previously, the Safetyo Collaborative Analytics and Learning Environment, otherwise known as SCALE, that I'll get into that more moving forward as well. Back in April, at the Police Services Board meeting, the City and I shared an update on Action Plan 1.3, which was to embed the community crisis support, and we did that by presenting the TCCS. Today, we're going to provide an update on 2 other key actions of Safetyo, and those are Actions 7.1, which is develop a comprehensive strategy to share, integrate, and analyze data across multiple institutions, and also Action 2.1, which is to develop a comprehensive multi-sector gun violence reduction plan. So in response to action item 7.1, the Safetyo Collaborative Analytics and Learning Environment, otherwise known as SCALE, was developed. SCALE is a collaborative partnership amongst public sector entities to coordinate analytical activities for Safetyo. The City of Toronto provides the backbone support for SCALE, and there's participation from us, the TPS, Toronto Community Housing, Toronto Public Health, the TTC, and community partners. So what exactly does SCALE do? SCALE conducts analysis, including geospatial analysis using cross-organizational sources. They have the ability to increase our awareness on what is happening in communities, and that supports our intervention planning. The team also develops solutions related to safe data sharing and storage. Most importantly, the SCALE team works collaboratively to increase cross-organizational data sharing. The team is able to bring all of our information to one table to use to maximize its potential so that we can use it for the benefit of community safety rather than having all of our selective information in silos and not working together. So when we look at some statistics, this slide shows a comparison of shootings and firearm discharges year over year. The statistic that Acting Deputy Code mentioned is from present day, whereas this is dated as of May 31st. So to better understand this slide, it's important to understand that when we say shootings, that is any incident where a firearm is discharged and a person is injured. A firearm discharge, on the other hand, is where there's evidence exists that a firearm was discharged, and an example of this would be a drive-by shooting where somebody was not shot, but there was obviously a shooting occurred. So as you'll see by the slide, as of May 31st, we had experienced 167 shootings and firearm discharges in 2022. At the same time this year, we had experienced 111 shootings and firearm discharges, and that's a decrease of 33.5%. As mentioned in the opening, the current decrease is actually 36%. At this time last year, we had experienced 192 shootings. As of today's date, we have experienced 122 shootings. When we break that down even further, we can see that people injured or killed have decreased across the city as a result of shootings by 31.3% in the last year, and persons killed have decreased by 61.1%. If we break that down further into homicides, we can see that from 2022 to 2023, we have had a year-to-date decrease of 18.5% in homicides, and in particular to shooting homicides, we've had a decrease of 63.2%. And again, these are the numbers from May 31st. So I'm going to speak a little bit about action item 2.1. And that action item is to develop a comprehensive multi-sector gun violence reduction plan. To further this action item, neighborhoods were prioritized. In order to prioritize, and you'll see on the screen the neighborhoods that have been prioritized. In order to prioritize these neighborhoods, multi-sector data, and this is a great example of us sharing our data from the city, from the Toronto Police Service, and from community housing, from the TDSB and TCDSB were all utilized. A combination of crime, social demographic, and equity indicators were all used to identify our prioritized neighborhoods. As a result of this work, 29 neighborhoods were prioritized and grouped into 6 geographic zones. These neighborhoods reside across 13 different police divisions and encompass 22 Toronto Community Housing Category 4, which is chronic gun violence neighborhoods. We are also working with the school boards, and they are continuing to assess and prioritize schools in these neighborhoods. So in order to work on our prioritized neighborhoods, a structure was put in place to mobilize our multi-sector approach, and these teams were created. The first one is the executive leadership team. This is a team that provides oversight and institutional buy-in. From the Toronto Police Service, Deputy Johnson sits on this team. The second team is the steering committee. This team provides direction, moves implementation forward, and ensures accountability. I'm a member of this committee, and I sit on that with Scott McKean. And we meet bi-weekly as well as ad hoc when necessary or when projects are coming up. Our superintendent and inspector of the Community Partnerships and Engagement Unit also sit on the steering committee. The next team is the escalation support team. As the name suggests, this is a team that's readily available at all times. In case our integrated safety coordination teams are having difficulty, we're able to escalate that and move things forward. The final team is the integrated safety coordination teams, or the ISCT teams. These teams provide real-time response and build local capacity. And I'll go into further detail because these are the teams who are really on the ground working. Each zone has a TPS representative, and other units throughout the TPS are brought in as needed. And all 4 of these teams work collaboratively with existing community partners, and we work on prevention, intervention, response, and recovery. So just to go into further detail on the ISCT teams, as I mentioned, they're truly the teams doing the heavy lifting on the ground. The city's Community Crisis Response Program chairs regularly scheduled meetings, but any partner can call ad hoc meetings to mobilize these teams when a need arises, such as if there's a shooting or a traumatic event in the neighborhood. This team, they've developed such close relationships that now this team just comes together when there's issues in the community. They're quick to join together and meet as needed. For each team, the service has assigned a divisional crime manager, and they work with our multi-sector partners, and they have the ability to bring in all the other partners throughout the TPS that can be utilized, such as the Community and Partnerships Engagement Unit, the NCOs, the Centralized Shooting Team, and on. Our multi-sector teams have built really strong relationships, and they're able to use each other for resources, whether it's in regards to these prioritized neighborhoods or otherwise. These members are becoming close contacts with one another, and it's really furthering our relationships. We have a robust sharing processes, and this enables these teams to coordinate for real-time connectivity, even when events happen, whether it's over the weekend or in off hours. Since July, the ISCTs have responded to all gun violence incidents, including school-based incidents. And that would be a time when the school boards get engaged at the same time, of course. The priorities of the ISCTs for 2023 are the development of strategies that focus on prevention, intervention, response, and recovery. An example of the ongoing work for the ISCTs is leading up to summer. All of the teams have submitted what's going on in their neighborhoods for the summer. What mitigating strategies do they have in place? What's the school board planning? What summer activities is the city planning? And for each division, what are the NCOs? And what's going on in the neighborhood? What's trending? What can we see? Potentially there could be anniversary dates coming up. And this way, everybody at the table knows what's coming up and what we're doing to mitigate those things. It provides an opportunity for us to know what we're doing collectively and what we're doing separately. So when we look at those priority zones and the gun violence in those priority zones, this slide shows a comparison of gun violence both inside and outside the priority zones. You'll notice that all but one priority zone 6, has experienced a decrease in shootings. And you'll see that's 33%. However, that's somewhat misleading in that in 2022, that zone had 3 shootings, and this year they've had 4 shootings. So although 33% sounds like a large number, that is in response to 1 shooting. Across the priority zones, and it's actually not on this slide, but if you look across all of the 6 priority zones, we have seen a 51% decrease in gun violence compared to last year. Outside the priority zones, we have seen a 19.6% decrease in gun violence. So as I mentioned, the integrated safety coordination teams were really the first step in accomplishing Safetyo's goal of establishing a multi-sector gun violence reduction plan. Our second step is the creation of a Toronto office to prevent gun violence with a multi-sector approach. The city is providing the dedicated backbone support for this office, and this office will have participants from us, from Toronto Community Housing, the TDSB, and Catholic School Board as well, and community partners. In this office, dedicated multi-sector staff will work collaboratively to develop gun violence reduction strategies guided by a public health approach. Our partnerships are already growing in leaps and bounds from the ISCT teams, and having our dedicated members working together in this office to prevent gun violence, seated in the same office, seated at the same tables on a daily basis, will truly take us to a whole new level of coordination. A job description for the TPS position was co-developed with the city, and I'm happy to announce that a member from the TPS has been selected. That's Inspector Roger Caracciolo, and he has been selected to represent the TPS on this groundbreaking team. To ensure accountability, the office will be supported by the executive leadership team I described earlier, and they will also be having a lived experience advisory. This team will be actively using scale for data insights in order to inform operations and decision-making. As part of our steering committee, and all of the teams that have developed as a result of Safetyo, we're truly strengthening our partnerships, and those partnerships are strengthening with the TDSB and TCDSB as well. Through our steering committee, 2 school summits were proposed. These summits were going to provide an opportunity to build and grow our relationships with the school boards. It provided an opportunity for TPS members, it was the unit commanders, the neighborhood community sergeants, and the NCO officers themselves to sit at a table with our school administrators, able to grow. Obviously, a lot of them already have strong relationships, but as administration on both sides move and change, it's so important to keep those relationships growing and building. So it provided all of these members an opportunity, those who are working in the same zones and divisions, to sit down together and discuss their issues. The first school summit took place on May 12th, and that was in a virtual format. 355 participants attended. We began the session with presentations from both the police service and the city, and then we moved into breakout rooms. And as I mentioned, those breakout rooms were divided not by zones, but by divisions, so that we could have the assets available from the TPS in each of those divisions, have the opportunity to be face-to-face with the school administrators. A second summit is currently being planned by the steering committee, and that's going to be taking place at the end of August to kick off the next school year. That will be planned along with ourselves, the TDSB, the Catholic Board, and the Toronto Community Housing is going to engage in that meeting as well. They weren't engaged with the first meeting really as a matter of timing. It was virtual, and we wanted to get as much done in the short time we had. So the Toronto Community Housing will be engaged in our second meeting. So before I close, I just want to turn it over to Executive Director Denise Campbell. And as I said at the beginning, and Scott and Denise have been acknowledged by the chief and by the acting deputy, and I really can't say enough how much our partnerships have helped us grow and learn. And you guys are always such an amazing resource. I can't thank you enough for that. And I'll turn it over to Denise.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so very much. It's an absolute pleasure to be back here just a month, two months since our last joint presentation on the Toronto Community Crisis Service. I just really wanted to add a few words to say, one, we are deeply thankful for the kind words and the partnership that we have been able to deepen over the years. Scott and I have been with the city for quite some time. And over, I think, our entire city careers, building a partnership with TPS has not been easy, but critical in order to effectively serve communities in Toronto. At different points, we have different roles to play. And those roles can sometimes be collaborators and partners. Sometimes it's about challenging each other. It's often about connecting different parts of communities and our systems together in order to do what is best in achieving community safety and well-being in this city. And I think both Scott and I feel that over the time that we've been at the city, there has been an unprecedented growth of openness and collaboration over the past few years. So I really want to acknowledge that, and I want to thank you for that. I smiled, as did Chief Demke, when one of the slides came up with the multiple structures of collaboration that we've built. That started, as I named last time I was here, with a phone call from Chief Demke, who was not chief at the time, but certainly inviting me to a partnership with him and our broader systems to co-create and host an executive leadership table. And that, along with all the deep work that has been done, particularly by my colleague Scott McKean, in order to develop the Safetyo Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, and to really listen to the voices of communities, other system partners, and help us build a path forward that we are seeing is starting to have deep and profound impact. So the one thing I would like to say in closing is sometimes in our systems, we see that things start to work, and we think that that means permission to put our attention elsewhere. Let me just say, that would be the very wrong move. We are just really at the beginning of scratching the surface in terms of our work together, and we just need to continue to intensify our partnership, integrate our data even more, and do the types of things that really can sustain reductions in community violence and gun violence in particular, and increase well-being in communities across the city. So thank you for your partnership, and we look forward to continued work together.
Thank you, Staff Superintendent Dawson, and to Ms. Campbell and Mr. McKenna. What an amazing presentation, and thank you so much. I just had a question. And then Councillor Nunziata and Member Kostakis. Apart from obviously and anyone can answer this, the amazing relationships and good work, which clearly you've given statistical results. Apart from whether or not a neighborhood's a priority zone, assuming you have full complement of neighborhood community officers, have you noticed whether or not there's any correlation between having that complement in those neighborhoods and a decrease in violence or shootings if you do have those officers?
So just so I can be clear, so are you saying when we have a prioritized zone and there is a neighborhood officer in that prioritized zone?
Or not even, you know, perhaps it's not a priority zone, but you do have those NCOs, and there is a decrease in shootings, even if it's, like you said, it looks like it's statistically significant, but it was, you know, 0 now and 1 last year. Does it still, is there any kind of correlation that suggests having those officers, and especially in the priority neighborhoods, and they are at full complement, that it decreases violence and shootings?
I don't have statistical evidence of that, but certainly anecdotally, there's no doubt that the Neighborhood Community Officer Program makes an immense impact on a community, the way that community is serviced, and the well-being and community health in that community. So I don't have statistics, but it's absolutely, definitely makes an impact on the relationships we have on that community and the work that we're able to do within that community. And that's preventative work, and that's intervention. So obviously, sometimes it's hard to put a number on that. What have we prevented by having those NCOs in place? It's hard to say for sure, but it's certainly having an immense impact.
Thank you. And even if it's one shooting to 0, that's one life. And I believe the chief, before we get to questions, has...
No, and it is on that question, Chair, if I may. I mean, the neighborhood officers, this is a complex ecosystem we're building and growing. And there's many, many people engaged in that ecosystem. And the neighborhood officers, I can tell you, over the years of developing and getting to where we are today, the change management, both within our organization, but most importantly in our communities, was enabled where we did have neighborhood officers with vibrant relationships. So the ability to intertwine the ecosystem and bring it together was absolutely enabled, where we had neighborhood officers with robust relationships that have earned the trust and confidence of the community as it relates to the role of the police, and intertwining the police in a suite of care that is now, you know, inclusive of a multi-sectoral group that comes together on a regular basis in real time in our communities.
Thank you. And I believe Vice Chair Nunziata, you had a question?
So, Denise, as far as the Toronto District School Board, so who's involved, like who participates in your meetings? Are the trustees informed or engaged at all, or is it just the superintendent level?
So perhaps I'll start and Scott can help. So we have been working right from the top since last fall. We have been meeting regularly with the Mayor Tory, now Deputy Mayor McKelvey, with the director of the board as well as the chair of the board, in order to figure out at an executive level our strategy for working together and key things that we can do. At that executive leadership table, so our next sort of rung, we have several senior folks from the TDSB and the Catholic Board as well participating, the directors of both boards and some of their senior staff. And then beyond that, at different levels, they have identified different staff to participate.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor. At the operational level, Executive Superintendent Jim Spiropoulos and the Caring and Safe Schools Principal Ainsworth Morgan are the representatives of the TDSB, and from the TCDSB, Michael Kakamo and Nadia Odranga. So they sit on the steering committee with Shannon and myself and others, and then in integrated safety coordination teams, there are local Caring and Safe Schools principals that are attached to those. The last thing I would say is, at the board level for both boards, those folks who are involved are reporting up. So TDSB put a safety plan in front of their board, and Jim Spiropoulos engaged the steering committee, and we supported the development of their safety plan and sit on an executive or a sort of expert advisory panel along with community members to advise the implementation of that plan.
Okay, and the reason I asked that is on Tuesday I had a town hall meeting and the school board trustee was there, and part of the presentation from the police services on what they're doing within the schools, and the school trustee was not aware, didn't have that knowledge of what was going on. So that's why I asked, is that information communicated down to the local trustees? So they're aware of what's going on, and that's the reason for my question.
So I certainly...
But I mean, that wouldn't be your job, that would be the chair of the board, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Like us, they are a very large system, and I think one of the things that Scott and I talk about constantly is how in our large systems, communication either helps or makes this very difficult depending on how well those systems communicate internally. So there's more work to be done, I would say, within the board. And one of the things that's been really critical has been the development of this integrated team that Acting Staff Sergeant Dawson spoke about within the Toronto Office to Prevent Gun Violence. So there is a person coming in from the TDSB into being what I call hybrid staff, so half us, half the TDSB system, in order to help us solve problems like ongoing communication, ensuring every part of their system is aware of the approach that we're trying to take together and can actively participate. Because it doesn't work if there's a key part that says, I don't know.
Yeah. Just one last question, if you don't mind. So I know that you've made presentations to the Toronto Housing Board as well, which I was part of. So looking at the map in the zones, so because of the work that Toronto Housing is doing, and there seems to be, and they've adopted the recommendations as well from you, Denise, from the city, some of this violence is around Toronto community housing buildings. So would you say that that's where the real problem is, where we have a number of Toronto community housing buildings, and that's why the partnership with Toronto Housing and the city and the police is very important for these areas, where I think that's where we have, most of the problems and violence.
Well, I would certainly say that there's a great awareness within TCHC and across our systems about incidents of violence that are happening in TCHC buildings and communities. And so it's been really important to all of us to prioritize a focus there. And in Safetyo, the focus is about shifting from reactive responses to prevention and intervention. And so it is very critical to all of this that we have the partnerships on the ground, the mitigation strategies, that we're understanding what's the underlying root causes. Enforcement is important, but it's really about the things that we can do to prevent and to intervene violence from happening in the first place.
Thank you.
Ms. Kostakis.
I have another question, but I'm going to pounce on this one and sort of piggyback on the comments of the TCHC and just the community. Is it correct to say that even though there may be some events that occur, activity that happens within TCHC, that it's about the community? The Safetyo plan is about the community, and that all of us are policing together. And I know you talked about collaboration, partnerships, and integrated services or data sharing, and totally different relationships and totally different levels of capacity and also impact within the community. So I just think, is it correct to say that it's really important that this is a community based, not necessarily where people live, whether they're in TCHC or within the neighborhood, so that we're not stigmatizing people within the communities of that the Safetyo plan addresses the communities and the areas where the higher levels of violence are happening, so that we could address the risk mitigation too, but also prevention, harm reduction, but take it to the different level. Is that correct to say?
I absolutely agree, and I think that's beautifully put. One of the reasons why the division I lead is at the forefront of the safety work is because we are ultimately, as social development, it is about how do we support systems, partners, communities, residents come together, combine resources, get out of the way or break barriers in terms of unleashing community assets, and bring the types of things that communities need in order to thrive. So we do poverty reduction, strengthening neighborhoods, equity work, and it's all from all of those places that we take an approach of supporting community safety and well-being. And I think you're absolutely right. Like, we work very hard not to stigmatize communities. At the end of the day, that doesn't help. What helps is that we are taking a collaborative approach. We're challenging each other and our systems. We're trying to fill gaps. It's been really important to have the provincial ministries at the table, at our executive leadership table, and woven throughout this process, because we need resources and policies from the provincial level that support communities on the ground. So all of that together, supporting community leadership, is really, I think, what's contributing to the kinds of numbers that we're seeing.
So back to the collaboration, partnerships, and I think our community is always coming from the public and community, and also the multi-sectoral organizations that are out there, and also just the different sectors of police, the city, and the TDSPs. They're the bigger entities. Mm-hmm. So for the more grassroots entities, and the community should always be partnered with, always collaborate, but the integration piece is, I think, where we probably want to be at in the 10-year sort of span. And I appreciate the comment of, this is the beginning. We're nowhere near where we could have been over the last even 30 years. We're almost full circle in some ways, but with different strategies and different capacities and long-term, I guess, prevention again and engagement. So in saying that, can you maybe speak to maybe a bigger challenge where we may not reach that at a certain stage, or maybe after the 10 years, but also speak to the successes and partnerships of the grassroots, not the bigger entities necessarily, and outside of the schools, where we find a lot of our, I don't call risk communities or high-risk communities or high-risk individuals, it is like our focus folks, high elevated risk factors that people are exposed to, the communities they're exposed to, so that, again, the stigma doesn't go on the individuals or the communities. So can you speak to perhaps what is, one, a big challenge to get there, two, perhaps a trend or an integrated service or partnerships that you see where we can get there within those 10 years, as challenging as that may be? Does that make sense at all?
That's a big question.
It doesn't have to have an answer. It could just see a process where people can get involved and engaged and find that, so we can all be part of this plan, because it takes every single one of us, right?
Absolutely. So I would say on the biggest challenge is just how complex our various systems are that are trying to work together. Systems are deeply resilient at snapping back right, to what they were, despite our best efforts to get everything to create change. And so that just means we have to try different approaches. We have to be working in an ongoing way. We have to ground things in policy and procedure and personnel. And so that, to me, I would say next year I'll be at the city for 20 years. And I would say that that is probably the one observation about how we work that is our biggest challenge. So not short-term measures, one-offs, those things come and go. I would say that we've been working very hard to be mindful of how fast we move with each other and not enabling community to be a part of it. And so we're very pleased that last year the federal government announced $12.3 million to the city to support gun violence reduction work specifically. The majority of those funds are going into community to support community-led initiatives, community-partnered initiatives. I think that's really key because we have a lot of grassroots community leaders who have ideas, strategies, and they're just poorly resourced to take any of them to scale or consistency. So it really matters to us that a big part of this work is about supporting them. The challenge we have is that those resources are time limited. And so I would say one of the biggest challenges to getting to where we need to be in the time frame we have currently under Safetyo's mandate is about that sustained action and sustained commitment that all orders of government, not just Toronto or Toronto Police Services, but all orders of government are doing to go in this direction. So when the community safety and well-being plans were legislated, no resources have come to the city to do this work, right? And we all know the challenge of the city financial situation. I don't have to tell you that. So I worry about the long term. We have the right things moving in the right direction right now. The challenge will be how we sustain that over time.
Okay, well, thank you. I just wanted to also just echo that working with both Denise and Scott in I call it my real world life in the last probably 20 years plus, just to commend the partnerships and the growth and the commitment and your love for the city, but also for our communities and the people in it, and not forgetting about the people in our community as well. So thank you to both of you. Always an honor.
I believe, Councillor Chang, you had your hand up. Thank you.
Thank you. It's wonderful to see collaboration, and I know it's not easy because everybody is very busy, has huge portfolios, and it's a very complex issue. I'm wondering, just to piggyback off Director Kostakis's questions about grassroots organizations, we know that they are really the drivers of many of the things that communities need. And I think just from a TCHC perspective, TCHC is identified and funded as a landlord. And therefore, all these organizations that are kind of patchworking the supports that are needed for these communities are just trying to figure out a way to be funded and sustainable in very random patterns across the city. And I'm wondering, is there an organization of some sort that brings all of those organizations together to share best practices, to share data, so that we have, I think, a better overview of what's happening across the city and where the best ideas are, as well as where the funding gaps are?
So I would say maybe a few things, and there isn't one overarching system. Toronto is big, complex, with a lot of players from community as well as from institutions. I would say that in 2005, the city started the Strong Neighborhoods work, and that's actually how we met. But to start the Strong Neighborhoods work, to have city and community working at tables, sharing best practices, creating local strategies, and that work continues Over the pandemic, we created the community clusters in order to take that approach across the entire city. And so I think that's very much part of it. We are currently working with United Way to assess all neighborhoods in the city to figure out what we'd like to recommend to City Council next year as this kind of approach. So those are sort of big picture pieces. We also have a council direction to create a community assets dashboard, as you know, Councillor Chang, as the initiator of that. So there are many pieces that are trying to help us work more together on the ground and supporting community intelligence. And then at a more granular level, we are just about to launch our second iteration of the youth violence prevention grants. And, you know, those grants are supporting grassroots efforts. And they, over the last 3 years, a number of positive things have happened from those efforts. Now, with Safetyo actually in implementation, we are building out a a youth violence prevention network, so that they're not now working only in isolation locally, but they are sharing practices across and being a far more strategic arm in our ongoing work together.
That's fantastic, and I think it's great that these grants will be connected in some way from a relationship and hopefully a data standpoint, so that we can, you know, replicate and scale what's working. And when you talk about that, I think of the Mending the Broken Sky group. I mean, that work is incredible, and really they need to be funded and scaled and multiplied in a meaningful way across our city. I'm wondering about the statistics here, where the shooting and firearm discharges have actually majority now are outside of priority zones. Is there any, you know, can anyone extrapolate why? Why is that the case? Is it our programs in these neighborhoods are working, or is it there's a new trend of some other kind of crime that's happening across our city?
So can we put that screen up perhaps to make it easier?
Yeah.
So when you look at that, when you look at the outside priority zones starting from 2019 and then moving forward, there has been movement, and in 2022, obviously, we had a jump up to 92, and now we're down to 74 at this point in this year. So in regards to what exactly is happening there, I think we're definitely seeing a significant drop in the shootings in the in the priority zones, because of all of the teamwork and all the collaboration and all the prevention and intervention work that's going on there. Those ones are dropping at a higher rate. Outside our priority zone rate, although we're seeing more than in our inside priority zone, you can still see there's obviously tremendous work being done there by virtue of the fact that it is down by the 19%.
Can I just add a little more? Because I think it's important to contextualize where we started with the data. And 2 years ago, one of the first injects of data was identifying where the shootings were happening the most in the city, which neighborhoods. And that was the starting point to then layering on other data sets that led us to 6 zones in 28 neighborhoods to focus on. But these were neighborhoods that 2 years ago had very different numbers. So, you know, we recognize that shootings have been across the city in many, many neighborhoods. But a starting point to expand on what actually had started before 2 summers ago, which was a far smaller scale. We scaled up to this 6-zone model with 28 neighborhoods. To start that off as an evidence-based decision-making, we looked at neighborhoods that had a very significant impact, that were having a significant impact of gun violence, and then layered other data on top of it that led to this final focus. So I don't know if you want to jump in further, but that is the context of where this all started 2 years ago. And at that time, recognizing the shootings happen in many parts of the city, but we needed to start focusing our efforts in the most impacted areas.
Yeah, and I think the only thing to add is that the Office to Prevent Gun Violence that we're building with staff from multiple institutions will be citywide. So we'll continue to use data to focus on the zones, but we are also paying attention to the entire city, and I think that that's an important balance that we have to strike.
Well, and then one last thing before, because it is a resource issue too, and I think that's been touched on, and I think it bears putting a fine point on it, that of course, any gun violence is not something we should tolerate. And we do need to focus on beyond this area, which we do with what we have. But there is a discussion to have on expanding and solidifying not just the 6 zones, but expanding the lessons learned here and the benefits of this multi-sectoral, intertwined, collaborative response to other parts of the city in a sustainable, resourced way for all the sectors that need to come together.
Thank you. I think my last question is about the relationship with TCHC, and I think, it's hard. You don't want to stigmatize the community because it's a beautiful community. People who live in TCHC neighborhoods are wonderful people there. So being careful with that, but also wanting to know the data of, beyond the zones, how much of the gun violence that we are seeing has a relationship with TCHC communities. So not necessarily on the site of, but perhaps victims and participants in the crimes. Is there any data that captures that? Just because I'm on the board of the TCHC, and I'd like to better understand how, what we could do from an upstream perspective, but having that data, I think, would be helpful.
I think there's a couple of different things. One, as we build out our multi-sector data approaches, we're working closely with TCHC, the service, and other partners on clustering how incidents are tracked, including around TCHC communities. Mm-hmm. Further, within scale, we'll be doing a study on people who've been victimized or people who've been victimized others when it comes to gun violence. And so we'll have a better sense of that in the evolution of our work. Mm-hmm. At this point, we are assessing the impact on TCHC communities and around TCHC communities. What I would say, though, is we have to think in neighborhoods because TCHC families work at other parts of the city and attend schools, and we have to think holistically and not just about TCHC as your point, and not sort of judging what happens in TCHC communities. And so we're thinking holistically from a data perspective and trying to be thoughtful and engaging community and what that looks like. So that'll be an evolution of this work.
And if I may, we have direction from Council and the TCHC board to review TCHC's community safety unit and its approaches. I think with the goal of getting it more in line with Safetyo, so that work is just starting. And I think we see an opportunity to bring these things, the approaches they're taking, more in line with the approaches that Safetyo calls for.
That's great. I think the challenge is that, all of this needs to just speak into what is the upstream investment and how much do we need? And if we need that, who is going to organize the delivery? Because TCHC is not an agency, not funded as an agency, but often stands in the gap when there's nothing else there. I think it's really important to have the supporting evidence that's needed, and I think this group is going to help do some of that work so that people living in our most vulnerable communities have the best supports possible. Thank you.
Thank you. That's an amazing presentation. And Councillor Crisanti, sorry.
Yeah, I'm not going to be very long at all. I think it was a great presentation and a lot of positives here, and clearly we've identified that prevention and intervention works. All I really want to know is around the question of data. Have you been able to identify what type of intervention, what type of preventative measures and activities that you present to communities that work the best? So we can maybe focus on those areas more than areas that maybe don't work as well. And so how are you analyzing that data to determine where our efforts should be, more focused on?
So I don't think we're fully there yet in the kind of definitive way that you would like. I think there's a couple things coming together. One, just from a city perspective, we have a youth outcomes framework that multiple parts of the city, I think 8 parts, have contributed to around the types of outcomes we need to see in youth programming. And now we're building the capacity across those 8 program areas that includes TCHC, multiple city divisions, TPS is at the table for us to be able to measure how close we are to achieving those outcomes and course correct. So that's just one piece of the puzzle that is underway. I would say that through SCALE, we are building the capacity not just to integrate our data, but also then to start to look at the very questions that you're asking. And I would hope that soon we'd be able to have something far more definitive. But this work didn't start just today. We build on lots of research about the types of best practices that are preventative and upstream and the types of interventions that are required. And through our work with the federal Building Safer Communities grants, we are also going to be evaluating a number of the measures that we're putting in and that we're scaling up with community and that communities also doing, so that we're doing the right kinds of packages of interventions. I would say at this stage, long term, is critical to the success. And I think that that's the thing that we might not do so well as systems, is to do consistent long-term types of programming and services in community that is responsive to the diversity of communities, that is trauma-informed, that is resident, not necessarily always resident-led, but certainly resident-informed. Like, it's some of those things that I think are obvious that we know, that I think sometimes we struggle over time to consistently provide and support in communities. Scott, do you want to?
Okay.
The only other thing I would add is gun violence is complex, and it takes a number of incidents. So you heard as Acting Staff Inspector Dawson talk about the centralized shooting team. The guns and gangs element, that is one end of the spectrum. The neighborhood community officers is another. From a city point of view, we have a number of interventions across that spectrum, from our community crisis response, the youth outcomes that Denise talked about, but also our efforts that public health is leading around adverse childhood experiences and really looking at like upstream supports for families. And all of those things play a critical element. What we haven't done is talked about how they come together. So as Denise said, as we build out like the outcomes of those areas, we'll be able to talk more definitively about how an early intervention impacts something later on.
Yeah, no, thank you. And that's precisely, I guess, what I'm looking for, that early intervention. How do we get to our young people that and children that are, get to them before the gangs get to them? That's the intervention part, the prevention part. We need to get to them at a very early stage. And I'm glad you're looking at that, where areas of where we can focus more and where we may need more investment. Because, we're getting into budget time, not only here at TPS, of course, but at Toronto City Council coming up. And then by the end of the year, we'll be more focused on budgets again. And we want to make sure that we are very clear, or have a clearer picture of where we need to invest more efforts to prevent crime and intervene in the right areas. Okay? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was an amazing presentation and generated a lot of questioning and thoughts. And thank you for at least a good news story. And also, it really does take a village. It lends credence to that. So thank you again for your amazing presentation. Yeah, and may I have a motion to approve?
Yes, I'll move a motion to receive the presentation, and thank you. And Denise, before you leave, I know there's a big hug. We all deserve a big hug, Denise, but I just wanted to say a few words before we move. And Denise, thank you, and thank you for the presentation, and as well, Shannon, thank you. Yeah, there you are. So, I mean, there's amazing work that's being done at the city and at the police level as well. And I think what's really important is that we partner, and I know, Denise, you're doing that now, and police services with the local agencies, and where there's issues, that we're actually funding some of these nonprofit agencies to provide the service for the youth and organizations. And I know that you've been working with me in my ward as well. And I know Toronto Housing, because I was on the Toronto Housing Board, which I usually have regular meetings with Toronto Housing where there's issues, and we have meetings with the police and we have meetings with the city. And what we have been doing, which is very successful, is Toronto Housing is providing space in some of their buildings to provide program and services in partnership with some of the nonprofit agencies to come in and provide these services. So we're moving along, and I think it's very positive. So I just wanted to thank you, and Shannon, thank you for the presentation.
May I have a seconder to receive? Councillor Chang, thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 3, which was a memo from Dee Buchanan Gisser, our Executive Director and Chief of Staff. The City Council decision, member motion MM 5.18, which was bolstering the Toronto Police Service Hate Crimes Unit. I believe, Mr. Morin, you were going to come and depute on that item.
That court training of yours. My mom called me Derek. So this issue has been in the media a lot recently, and since a lot of you have taken a real oath of office that ends in "So help me God," Mark 10:6 says that, "But from the beginning of the creation, God made them male and female." So in the City of Toronto's member motion that's included in this report, it says, all residents in Toronto should be able to go about their daily lives free from harassment and hate. So I don't know if anyone heard, but I bumped into Councillor Bradford recently, going around begging people to vote for mayor. And it ended up, his assistant accused me of harassing him. So I have an actual deputation to make about that, and I appoint Chief Myron Demke to act as the trustee for me in this matter, and respectfully direct him to investigate and ask Councillor Bradford, what exactly was the question I kept asking Councillor Bradford that only required a simple yes or no answer, that he refused to give to me on the basis that I was trying to jam him up, and that he wasn't going to answer my question because, as he put it, I'm not going to answer your question here because I know what you're going to do. You'll go and put it on a shirt. He knows me so well. So this item actually made me think about what does the criminal commercial code actually say about hate? So I'm not going to read the whole section. It's 319.1. Everyone who, by communicating statements in any public place, incites hatred against any identifiable group where such incitement is likely to lead to a breach of the peace is guilty of A, an indictable offense and is liable to imprisonment for a term not exceeding 2 years, or B, an offense punishable on summary conviction. I just want to say, by me speaking at this meeting, that shall not be deemed to be in any way my consent expressed or implied, in doing so as fraud. God bless His Majesty the King, and long live His Majesty the King. And if I've ever led the Toronto Police Service to believe in any way that I am Her Majesty and an organization, they actually haven't updated the criminal code yet, pertaining to everyone, as mentioned in section 319 of the criminal code, then that would be a mistake, and that I ask the Toronto Police Service to please forgive me. So I was listening to Rashmi Nair on News Talk 1010 the other day, talking about pride flags being damaged and being equated to hate-motivated crime. This is from Wisefield versus Canada, 1994, where the Federal Court of Appeal said, "Our charter guarantees freedom of expression, not merely freedom of speech. Even in the United States, where the First Amendment to their Constitution guarantees only freedom of speech, the courts have developed a concept of expressive conduct which amounts to free speech. Conduct such as wearing black armbands to school as a protest against U.S. policy in Vietnam, flying the American flag superimposed with the peace symbol, flag burning, have all been held to be expressive conduct amounting to speech and hence warranting constitutional protection." This is from Mercury Bell versus Amosin, 1986, Federal Court of Appeal. "The well-established rule of international law is that the law of the flag state ordinarily governs the international affairs of a ship." So let's not lose sight of what flags were really meant for. Last month, I spoke about what's being considered hate speech these days as being stretched too far by the hurt feelings, I'm offended group. This was in the Toronto Sun the other day. A teacher in England accused 2 students of being homophobic after they questioned a classmate who identifies as a cat. Not exactly a priority 1 call there, right? Last month, I also spoke about the hate speech bill they're trying to push through on the people in Ireland. This is from the Irish Green Party Senator Pauline O'Reilly on their hate speech bill. She said, "When you think about it, all law, all legislation is about the restriction of freedom." That's exactly what we're doing here, but we're doing it for the common good. And if your views on other people's identities go to make their lives unsafe, insecure, and cause them such deep discomfort that they cannot live in peace, then I believe it is our job as legislators to restrict those freedoms for the common good. Let's not forget what Section 96 of the Courts of Justice Act says, that basically this is a common law jurisdiction where the rules of equity prevail, and one of those rules of equity is equity will not allow a statute to be used as an instrument of fraud.
Thank you. Any questions?
I just want to make clear to the deputant, if the deputant has a complaint to make about anybody, then he should follow the regular channels to make such complaints. The chief of police will not be receiving any complaints here. There are channels for complaining, and I can speak to the deputant after the meeting on the means of doing that to make sure that any concerns the deputant has are actually addressed in the means in ways that are available to him.
No, I don't think I was laying a complaint. I just wanted to put it out there what happened.
Thank you. All right, may I have a motion to approve? Ms. Kostakis, second. Ms. Spencer, all in favor? Thank you. The next item number 4 was held down. We had a question from Councillor Chang, and it was regarding the request for a receipt of donation from the ESD for the canine that was donated.
This is wonderful news. It's probably one of the hardest crimes for anyone to work with, internet child exploitation, and to receive this canine is a wonderful piece. So I was just wondering, how did they find us? You know, did we apply for this? Are there other dogs being donated in Canada to other police forces? It was more of a, this is wonderful, let's talk about it.
We have Inspector Gomes here who will be in a position to answer those questions
Great,
with a little more
you.
specificity.
Good morning.
So yes, to simply answer your question, there was a bit of an application process. So early in April, we became aware of our partner service in Peel Region in our similar circumstance with an ICE section, whereby they had recently acquired such a canine and have had success since they've had he, I believe, for roughly 10 months. And so then we reached out to that same OUR, Operational Underground Railroad, group to flesh out essentially how we could be in the same circumstances, a recipient of such a donation.
Is the canine here now, or is he traveling on a plane to come here?
So she's continuing her training. So she ultimately begins her destiny, if you will, via therapy training, so emotional therapy, and then eventually will turn into the scent detection piece, of which then our identified, upon approval, identified member will be joining her to continue on her journey in relation to her scent detection expertise.
Mm-hmm. I think it's just wonderful that it's dual purpose canine, so that emotional support for a very difficult job while also helping with enforcement. So congratulations on receiving the grant, and we look forward to meeting Miss whatever her
Blue.
name will be.
Her name is Blue.
Oh, Miss Blue.
Yeah. Who's a black lab, Labrador Retriever.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve item number 4? Ms. Chang. Second? Vice Chair Nunziata, all in favor? It's carried. Moving down now to item agenda number 8. It is the list from June 2023, the special constable appointments and reappointments. We have a deputation, I believe, from Mr. Avila.
Good morning. Thanks for the opportunity to address this matter of the special constables for TCAC. Not very often we have deputants, so I guess I'm going to be that deputant who's going to speak up on the TCAC Community Safety Unit Report year 2022. While I read the report, there's nothing that talks about the training that they receive as members of special constables. I know that Toronto Police certify each member every year. They come with a list of appointments and reappointments. One of the things I have expressed my opinion at the Tenant and Services Committee of the TCAC is with regards to body-worn cameras. It is important that we have accountability of these public servants. So the reason why I'm here is to request that if the Special Constable Unit Division led by Mr. Alan Burton can provide this board with an update with regards to body-worn cameras, because I believe there's a pilot project, but no details at the board. Another issue I have is with relation to the complaint process that TCAC has to address issues of noise complaints. I'm not going to go into details, but just an overall idea for you, how it is to live in the ghetto. How does it feel to live in 220 Oak Street? Well, the building is full of people who have, regular and some that has, deep problems with addictions and mental health. I have 2 types of disabilities, physical, and I have also mental health. I try my best to stay normal and to be here today. However, lately my sleep is being affected by someone who is banging at 3 o'clock in the morning every day. So no matter how much I make court report files, complaints, nothing is being done to address this problem. And I also realize that some of the CSU officers are unaware of the tenant engagement process. When I addressed to them, I said, I'm a tenant rep elected by TSC residents. They can't to ignore it. They can't to say, who are you? Who can speak for all the tenants? Well, this is what I've been doing for the last 13 years. Come to speak for residents of Toronto Community Housing in general, but specifically also for my residents of Regent Park. So what I need to ask the CSU officers to have a refreshment training on the tenant engagement service that we provide as residents, so that we are treated with respect. So that's the reason we need to have those body-worn cameras, because in case, in eventuality that there is a discrepancy of information, we can always go back to and check out the video, right? And see who says what. Because I've been told that I hear noises in my head. So, yes, Councilor Nancy, I'm looking at you. You sit at the board, and you don't want to hear these things, but unfortunately, I'm here to speak. I had the right to say whatever I want. Thank you. And the good news is that one of the special constables, in looking at this matter, said to me, Miguel, there is a way we can address this problem and find a solution. Tell Alan Britton to bring with us, members of the bylaw enforcement office, so that they can enforce the noise bylaw, because we can. We are CSU officers, and we cannot enforce the bylaw of noise. So that will be great if Alan Britton is watching this presentation by me, and he can bring with him next time a bylaw officer and enforce the noise bylaw, because your CSU officers are unable to. The only thing you guys do is come, knock on the door, and says, would you please stop making noises, dear resident? And that's all they do, and they go. So we have to be more proactive as to how we solve this problem. So thanks for listening to me, and that was my presentation on the Community Safety Units Officers of the Toronto Community Housing, which I'm proud to serve as a tenant rep since the year 2011. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Avila. So you had a couple of comments. Number one, you were concerned about the training of...
Can you speak louder? I can hear you.
You had some concerns over the, training of special constables, particularly TCHC. The second, you were asking about an update as it related to a pilot project of special constables wearing body-worn cameras. And then the third is you have a bit of a complaint as it relates to the way you're being treated by special constables. So I just wondered if the chief could perhaps answer your first couple of questions, and then maybe talk to you about where you could actually specifically make your complaint.
Yeah, I think I'd encourage the deputant to depute at TCHC board, which is the forum to receive at least some of this information. Certainly, TCHC has some latitude on what training their officers get, and we can certainly speak to them about referencing this board meeting to take a look at the deputant's remarks, but I would encourage the deputant to speak to the TCHC board.
Thank you. I appreciate you bringing your concerns to us. Any questions for Mr. Avila?
So just to clarify, if there is a pilot happening, and I don't know if there is, with regard to body-worn cameras, that would be TCHC oversight, is that correct?
Well, frankly, this agenda item is about special constable appointments and reappointments and not about body-worn cameras, so I don't have that material in front of me, because that is not what this agenda item is about. Mm-hmm. We can certainly come back to the board with that at a future time if required.
May I have a motion to approve? Vice Chair Nunziata, second by Member Kostakis. All in favor? Thank you. Seeing no objections, it's carried. We're now at the consent agenda, item number 11, which was a memorandum from Executive Director Buchanan Gisser as it related to paid duty dates rates, January 1st of 2023. And first, I believe, Mr. Avila, you wanted to speak on this?
Thank you again for the opportunity to address the board and this important request by the Toronto Police Union for an increase of 19.4%, 14.9% for premium pay. I feel that I had to speak up my mind with regards to this matter. I totally reject this increase as a taxpayer, as a member of that is, racialized poverty-ridden community on Regent Park. I believe that the best way is to fund our communities, to address the issues of violence, as we have discussed today, this morning, in regards to Safetyo. The predecessor of Safetyo was the Toronto Poverty Reduction Program, a project that my former councillor Pam McConnell established the City Council back in year 2014. The goal was to address the roots of poverty, but we haven't done it. All we have seen is an increase in police budgets and prison systems because it makes the rich richer. We also have a Toronto food chapter that was established in 1975, which meant to put first the needs of the community to alleviate the need for food banks. Instead of food banks, we can increase people's wages, for instance. We can increase the rates for ODSP or OW. It's so sad that the Ontario appointment person here is gone. It's not today listening to this conversation because he can bring it back to his friend, Doug Ford, to understand that the increased policing in this city is unaffordable. We need to upload the policing to the province so that we can have money to fund our communities and escape poverty. Rather than to speak all the time about affordable housing, we must have the need for rent geared to income. All I hear from Councilor Nanciata or Councilor Crisanti, other councilors, Bradford, or former Councilor Bailao, and all these candidates are saying, let's talk to the province, let's go to the feds, and let's help these people. But when it comes to policing, you just write the check, and you just approve whatever they bring to your attention. You just have an increase last year, or 10% at the last budget cycle in 2022. So by asking this increase of premium pay, really, it's not, you're not serving the community. You're serving the needs of a few 500 or 5,000 civil servants. So addressing gun violence is by addressing the roots of violence. In conclusion, I want to say that I disagree with this request by the union, and I want to encourage each member of City Council who is in this room today to reject it as well, because it's unrealistic, it's unaffordable, and it's an insult to all these people that are living in encampments. I had to come every day through Allen Gardens when I come to this board, and I see more tents. I see more need for housing, but instead, we're increasing police budgets, which are unaffordable. So please, make a motion. If you want to listen to the police union for that increase, please ask your buddy Doug Ford to pay for that, since he loves too much the police. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Avila. I think the chief is just going to, for further clarification, explain.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. This is about the pay duty rates. This is not about the Toronto Police budget. It's pay duty rates paid by vendors outside of the Toronto Police budget, outside of the city allotted budget for the Toronto Police. This is for pay duties. So this is not about the Toronto Police operating budget.
Well, can I answer that?
Well, I didn't offer a question. I'm simply telling you that that's what this is about.
Okay, thanks for the explanation. But again, it's unaffordable. In my opinion, the increase of premium pay for pay duties, we have always asked those jobs should be done by civilians, like flag bearers. I know we have a program to deal with traffic control management in the city, but we should be able to see a move from police officers by doing this job, because this is the proverbial, they're watching just a pothole, and it's clearly shameful when tourists come to Canada and says, what are you police officers doing all day? Watching a pothole, watching a construction site. And what are they doing? They are in social media, talking, chatting. They're not doing any service for the community. So please, that's the way we want to detach the police, so that more civilians are taking over officer jobs.
Thank you.
And it's not a crazy idea to defund the police. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Also want to note there was a written submission. I just want to thank John Reed from the Toronto Police Association, who also made a submission as it related to this matter. And at this point, can I have a motion to receive, please? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that. I'm sorry, Franz.
Yeah, it's for staff. It's for the staff. I have a question. Yeah, okay.
You decided already the decision, okay. Councilman Seata.
So to staff, can you just explain? So pay duty is paid by the company or the organization that hires. It's not paid by taxpayers. And as far as traffic control, now the city has recently, in the past few years, made agreements with these construction companies that are doing construction or road repairs. They pay for it rather than the city. So just clarify, am I correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So I'll move the report. Oh, I'll move the report.
Councillor Chain?
So I'm just wondering, who will bear the burden of the increase in cost? So what are the organizations that tend to use paid duty officers?
Oh, it's vast and varied. This paid duties are something that is across the city for various things. So there's not a singular necessarily entity, and we could probably have it expanded on a little bit further by Staff Superintendent Brett Nick will offer a little more context.
Hi, good morning. As far as the pay duties go and the selection of pay duties, it's typically based on legislation. So there's different ways that pay duties are determined to be required. A lot of times it's through the City of Toronto permit, where it's mandated. If there's a liquor license application or different things in play, we'll have to have pay duties that are mandated by the City of Toronto Permit Office. There's also under the Highway Traffic Act certain legislation where it has to be a police officer that takes on that pay duty role. And one of those is if it's within 30 feet of an intersection. Mandated, can't be anyone else. But our unit commanders, our divisional planners, as well as our MPO unit, we work with the organizers to try to come up with alternatives as well. Can we use signage? Can we use security? Is there any other method outside of pay duty officers that can be utilized? But the amount of venues that we have, as far as the Rogers Centre, the Scotiabank Centre, Budweiser, there's so many different venues. Our construction companies, movie sets, over to our year to date already, we're at over 17,000 requests for pay duties and pay duties being filled.
Wow. So just, I think what I was asking is, the types of organizations, so movie production companies, developers. I think one of the concerns that we've heard from the community is when it impacts community events. So like Pride. So when a community is trying to, and often with great challenge, get the money to organize a community event, the burden of a significant increase for this specific line item is really hard. And I'm wondering, how many community events or community building organizations are impacted, potentially making their efforts even unaffordable. Has that been considered?
Absolutely. It's being considered almost on a daily basis, where we try to balance out the resources required for our day-to-day operations. When there are available resources, we will support cultural events and different events, but it's usually an approach, a multifaceted approach, with some pay duties, with some on-duty resources, and if necessary, some callback officers.
So I think we were a little taken aback by this raise because it didn't come to board officially, and it did, but it didn't. And I'm just, at a time when finances are so challenging, this is a very hard message because there's a trickle down, right? So a raise here means a raise in, regardless of its entertainment, movies, development, it trickles down to everybody else. And so I know that the police board police association has the authority to do this without consultation, but I'm wondering, is there any opportunity for more conversation prior to decisions of this nature, especially given this is a significant jump? It was, larger than inflation. And I know that in previous years it did, it was held at zero for a very long time, but is there any opportunity for more engagement prior to a significant jump like 14.6%?
Ms. Delluel?
Yeah, if I can maybe just jump in. So in terms of the rate itself, we really don't have any control or say. The board doesn't, and nor does the service. This is a collectively bargained entitlement at the sole discretion of the TPA. The other thing I will just raise, we did compare what the rate is now, the proposed increase, with what we would typically pay our officers in a callback or overtime sort of setting. And so the goal is always to align them pretty close, because what you don't want is a competition between, paid duty and essential kind of core policing through callback. So what I believe the intent is, despite the large increases, that there were so many years of 0%, that rate was actually falling behind what our current rates are at the service. And so it's really an attempt to kind of catch it up. We did look at how comparable they are. They're just within a few dollars of what we would typically pay an officer at the service. So just a bit of context in terms of, I think, why you're seeing sort of an increase in recent years.
It would be helpful moving forward in this year of transition to have some kind of alert to when a community organization is encountering some duress because of this raise, just so, obviously we want to work collaboratively and make sure that these things happen, but I think it'd be helpful to just monitor the impact, even if we don't have a say over it. We want to make sure that the community organizations that are struggling would have the support that they need and that we can work together to make that happen. Does that need a motion or? No?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
But I think your comments have been captured in terms of what your concerns are. And
Okay, thank you.
I believe Vice Chair Nunziata made already a motion to receive. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Member Kostakis. Seeing no objection received. And our last item is item 13. It's a report from Chief Demkew. It's the semi-annual report of Occupational Health and Safety update for July 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2022, a full year summary, and also a member wellness being strategy update. I believe we have a deputation. Mr. Moran.
So in this report, it says data to date demonstrates that active COVID-19 and other respiratory infections are at a stable rate. However, in the event that this changes, we have an infrastructure in place that can easily be scaled up to respond to the needs of members and the service. So since you guys brought up data, something you probably wouldn't know about is at the September 2021 Board of Health meeting, then Vice Chair Councillor Kristen Wong-Tam requested data from Dr. Davila regarding the rate incidence of myocarditis after getting a COVID shot. Kristen Wong-Tam spent 31 seconds asking her question, ending it with, "How serious is this rate of incidence of myocarditis?" Dr. Davila then says to her, well, being respectful of the time of the board, then runs out the clock to 3 minutes and 8 seconds without ever answering Kristen's question. 2 minutes and 37 seconds of Dr. Davila feeding Kristen Wong-Tam a load of BS instead of giving her a direct answer. Because, like, if I'm a Toronto police officer and I'm going to be engaged in foot pursuits every once in a while, I think that's information that I'd like to know for myself, right? So someone on Twitter who goes by the Canadian Independent did a Freedom of Information with the City of Toronto for some data. This is the response letter that they got from Christy Pratt, Deputy City Clerk. She says that you have requested access to a copy of all Toronto Public Health location emails or documented conversations that mention serious adverse events, injuries, and death related to any of the COVID-19 vaccines administered. That's probably information that people would like to know also. However, if he wants to get this information, it's only going to cost him $37,140. Like, hell, why don't you make it $1 million? But you know what? I think Colin here, he could get it for free. Another guy on Twitter, this great unsung Torontonian named George Sawisian, said when he heard about that, for $37,000, you got to know that there's some incriminating evidence in that search results. Otherwise, it wouldn't cost that much, right? So the rest of my presentation is just a bunch of links to various updates regarding COVID that I've just figured that the well-being unit here would want to follow up on. This is from CBC. Excess mortality or deaths above what would be normally anticipated is a signal to public health officials that something concerning is happening and needs to be addressed. Why StatsCan says Nova Scotia is seeing significant excess mortality. Afshine Emrani, an MD, says he's a cardiologist, posted an article on Twitter from the scientific journal JAMA Network where he says the CDC confirms that COVID vaccinations increase the risk of myocarditis by 13,200% according to a new study. This is from Mark Slapinski from Toronto99.com, citing Blacklock's reporter, June 6, 2023. The Privy Council office in a secret memo said COVID vaccine injuries and deaths have the potential to shake public confidence and must be carefully managed with winning communication strategies. A federal compensation fund to date has paid out millions on injury and death claims. Government messaging following an adverse event will be important. This is from the Toronto Sun. The memo also suggests skewing stats to minimize the impact of vaccine-related deaths or injuries, such as stating the chance of it happening to me being 1 in a million rather than it has happened 5 times. One link, top insurance analyst says that 600,000 Americans per year are dying from the COVID shots. This is from Michael P. Sanger, author of Snake Oil, How Xi Jinping Shut Down the World. Study from John Ioannidis, the world's most cited physician, suggests a much lower pre-vaccine IFR, infection fatality rate, than previously believed. At a global level, pre-vaccination IFR may have been as low as 0.03% and 0.07% for 0 to 59 and 0 to 69-year-old people, respectively. One says here, a new Cleveland Clinic study confirms negative efficacy of COVID vaccine boosted 33 times more likely to get COVID from the Epoch Times. COVID-19 effectiveness against hospitalization turned negative over time, according to CDC data presented on June 15th. The effectiveness against hospitalization plummeted to negative 8% for people who received one of the old COVID-19 shots. And Newsweek magazine said it's time for the scientific community to admit we were wrong about COVID and it cost lives.
Thank you, and also thank you for your written submission that you included with the links. Any questions? Mr. Moran? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you. Your mom called you Anne.
Yes, she did. Annie, actually, but and at this point, I think we've completed it. For Mr. Moran? No, not for Mr. Moran, but I have. All right. Yep, I've brought it up. Thank you.
I just wanted to ask a question about page 13, the 5-year statistics. So I couldn't understand what the numbers are that I'm looking at. So is it, for example, animal incidents? Is it 11 incidents where there was they had to seek health care? And for lost time, is it 4 days, 4 weeks, or 4 people had to lose time due to an incident? It wasn't clear to me.
So the way, and Ivy certainly can clarify, but I think the way we've outlined this is when there is an injury on duty, there's 2 components to what that could be. It could be just pure healthcare costs and the number of individuals that just have that. And then that injury could also just be time off work with no healthcare cost. So the total, 15, would be the number of incidents.
Okay, so it's not amount of time lost. Is there a parallel information of amount of time that has been lost due to these incidents?
There is. I'm just seeing if it's in the report. If not, I can certainly supplement that.
Would be great. And lastly, I noted on page 4 the significant rise in mental disorders. So particularly peaking, I think during the height of COVID at 75% of claims related to mental disorders. And then in 2022, it's 67%. And I'm just wondering, I know it probably the population at large has had a lot of mental health challenges after COVID. There seemed to be a tipping point. And I'm wondering, I just wanted to check in. It's 2023 now, we're halfway through the year. Are we seeing it coming down, or is it continuing to be quite high? Is there any current data?
So we do have early indication first half of the year that we're actually flatlining. So COVID, if you take out sort of the anomalies around the pandemic, we're actually seeing either a flatlining or even a moderate reduction compared to pre-pandemic levels. So it is underneath all this data, and certainly I think later in the year we'll be able to report on 2023, but we are seeing a positive story around claims management and even just number of incidents overall.
Mm-hmm. And I appreciate the wellness events for this year, and this month is Post-Traumatic Stress and Success Month, and I hope that all the officers who are suffering with post-traumatic stress are getting the support they need. So thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions out of this report? Yeah, can I have a motion to receive? Yeah. Member Kostakis, seconder. Ms. Spencer, all in favor? Thank you. Seeing none opposed. That completes our agenda for today. Just want to say the next board meeting will take place Thursday, July 27 at police headquarters. And may I have a motion to adjourn? Ms. Kostakis. I don't think we need to second it. And Ms. Spencer seconded it. Thank you.